My name is Erin Martinez, and I am a licensed clinical social worker and an ASEC certified sex therapist. I'm a bit sad that I'm remote today. I was intending to be in person. I'm actually work out of the Detroit area, and I kind of at the last minute had to do some traveling, so I'm very appreciative to our hosts who were able to help us get this set up so I could at least be with you virtually. Um, we have a small group, I'm noticing, so certainly we'll have time for questions afterwards, but if there's something that pops up for you in the meantime as we're talking, a comment to share or a question, I would love for you to just do that in real time. Maybe if you can gesture for the mic and we can make it as interactive as possible, that's tremendous too. Sometimes a smaller group is nice for the topic of sexuality because it can be a topic people don't always want to talk about or engage about in a larger group. And in fact, I think sometimes people are even scared to walk in the door of a presentation about the topic of sexuality. So, thank you for coming in and thinking about this as an important thing to explore in your life and in your work. Um, I'm sort of thinking about our group at the conference today as people who will need this information for themselves, but are also people that will be disseminating this information to many other groups. And so I tried to put together information that may be helpful to you as you're sitting here, but may also be helpful to your audiences you share this with. So I came into the work of sexual health through the pathway of trauma. Um, and I think that that is one of the reasons that it has made a lot of sense working with individuals who are living with HS, because there is a significant amount, obviously, of medical trauma in your lives. I think also, most importantly, when I think about sexuality and intimacy, I also think of it as justice work. I think oftentimes in medical settings, in my own history with an autoimmune condition, when I'm to raise questions about sexuality or sexual needs, I find that sometimes that's considered a topic that when we take care of the other stuff, we'll get to that, right? Um, and I think it's so important for us to prioritize sexuality and sexual pleasure as a right in our lives and something that we believe we deserve time, energy, conversation, communication about in our world. So think about some of these ideas as not just your own work to do, but also work to put on others in your life, whether that be future, current partners, and also medical, mental health providers that are working with you in your work. So I wanted to share this quote that really inspired me. Um, the term intimate justice was coined by Sarah McClellan, and she's a professor of psychology and gender studies at the University of Michigan. Um, this was used by Peggy Orenstein, author and researcher, in a talk she gave and in a book she wrote not recently, sorry, about 10 years back. And it's in reference to the idea that, the World Health Organization talks about sexual health as a basic human right. And if we extend that, intimate justice is the right to engage in sexuality, in sexual expression, with the right to pleasure. And it's such an interesting thought, even if you can remember your own growing up and your own youth experiences and your own conversations with doctors. You may have been somebody who was diagnosed with HS in early adolescence. You may even think of, cousins, nieces, nephews, young people that you see growing up now would you feel like you would have conversations with them to think about not only how do they protect themselves, how do they reduce harm, but how do we also help people believe that they're entitled to pleasure and to joy in intimate experiences? And that's a different conversation. So the quote, there seems to be a difference between the entitlement to engage in sexual behavior versus the entitlement to enjoy it. I think a lot of people that I've worked with over my career as a sex therapist often believe that they want to try to fit into a box, make their body fit into a box, make their sexual behavior fit into a box so that it can um, fit the definitions and needs of what society teaches us sexual pleasure should look like, and it also for current or future partners so we can sort of achieve what they believe they want to see or want to feel with us. And I think when we set ourselves up to be in those positions, we actually are setting ourselves up for failure because we're not prioritizing and learning about our own bodies and our own needs. So I invite you to think about this term intimate justice as a source of empowerment. Um, in a world where we're often thinking about justice work, I think sometimes we minimize this, and so I think this is an opportunity at a conference like this to sort of raise that as an also an important fabric of justice work in our own lives. So another really key concept for all individuals, I would say, but particularly individuals who are managing health conditions, managing pain in their lives, I think we need to really switch the script. We need to move from an idea of thinking about how will I perform. When we focus on sexual performance, we generally are thinking about things about how we will be perceived, how we'll be seen. That's often a very limited definition of our bodies. It also is usually prioritizing some form of penetrative sexual activity. It generally prioritizes intercourse, and we in this room can understand that for reasons of our bodies not feeling good, particularly in intimate areas such as our genitals, penetration may not be always the best way to be intimate. Um, and so for a lot of the communities I work with, they don't want to prioritize sexual experiences in terms of penetration. And it makes them feel like, well, what's left, right? Do I have to avoid this? And so the first thing we really need to do is think about, if I'm not thinking I have to perform in that way, what then do I open the door to? The other thing when we're thinking about sexual performance, we generally measure how good we are at it by things like how long or how hard an erection is, um, how much we lubricate, right? So there's been this myth that has probably gone on as long as the world has been spinning that bodies that have a vulva, vagina will lubricate upon feeling aroused. And so the more arousal, the more lubrication. Lubrication can work that way. It can be a sign that somebody is experiencing pleasure. It can also be a sign that somebody's experiencing fear. And so one of the adaptive parts of bodies was when, if you think about this, not an easy or good thing to think about, especially first thing in the morning, but when you think about historically how much sexual violence has been used as a war crime. Our bodies have adapted also, and we've discovered this back in studies going back to the 1950s. Our bodies have adapted to lubricate as a result of almost keeping our bodies safe. When we know we're going to be forced into something, fear may also be a reason that our bodies lubricate, right, to protect the body so there's less tearing. You also see this very much associated with porn culture, which is not a vote yes or no for porn culture. It just is. That squirting is often talked about as sort of the supreme sexual performance, right? And then the orgasm. Do people fake it? How good is it? Did somebody else have one? And so these become measurements that take us away from the idea of am I feeling pleasure, and become sort of our report card for ourselves or someone else on how good it is. And when we are doing that, when we are limited to that, we're kind of trapped into another person's concept of what our bodies should be doing. So I think important for all people, but particularly I think this is a really important topic for individuals living with HS, is giving yourself permission to think about your sexual pleasure. And that opens us up to thinking about our body as a map, right? If I think head to toe, including my mind, including my fantasy, where am I, how do I want to experience pleasure? If I think about ways that I want to be touched that are maybe new, that I want to explore, when I work with clients as in a space of sex therapy, I often work with an exercise we call sensate focus, and that's really a guided sensory mindful exploration of the body to help us identify other areas that maybe feel good to be touched but also feel very, very arousing. um, when we're thinking about sexual pleasure, we're also thinking about ways to increase connection and awareness, not to just another person, but initially to our own body. Um, Experiences of pain and with HS, I think, in talking to hundreds of people over the years, the feeling that we are detached from our body because of pain, sometimes because of shame, because of what we don't want to see. And then also our power being taken away because medical professionals are sort of dictating what happens to our body with good intention, of course, to help us. But it takes us away from our connection and our awareness of our own body. So, inviting us to think of that as I have many things I have not learned about this body as a sexual being, and how do I want to connect to it? The idea of adventure is also a really important piece for many people, and it really it depends on probably your own spirituality, your own, if you're currently partnered, how flexible and how interested are they in adventuring. But I think certainly when we look at individuals in the kink or BDSM community, they're very far away often from this idea of penetration and as sexual pleasure, and much more involved in this idea of adventure, of thinking about how the play of power and passivity and submission can also light up that dopamine that is associated with sexual pleasure in their lives. Um, and then thinking about the way that one individual wants to experience sexual pleasure is inherently very, very different from another person. So, that your sexual pleasure is completely unique and needs to be discovered. Um, and how will that also enhance, how does sexual pleasure enhance not just your experience of sex, but also your emotional and physical health as well? And again, if anyone has questions as we're going through, feel free um, to raise a hand. I can see you just a little bit. Um, so I also like to really help people recognize that when we're thinking about sexuality, expression, and intimacy, we sometimes dive right into the idea of the erotic, right? And sometimes when we have been pulled away from sexual pleasure, when we haven't been as involved, when we haven't been given permission to explore, that can be pretty intimidating. So, as I mentioned before, the idea of sensate focus, which is a really important tool in sex therapy, um, we really are thinking there more about the idea of mindful or sensual touch. So, um, one of the things I ask people who are in partnered relationships or even beginning a new partnered experience to think about is how do I set a boundary, right? So if my body is not feeling good, if I'm in, a scale 1 to 10, maybe I'm at a 6 or 7 at my pain level. Um, and I'm spending time with a partner who is a sexual partner of mine, and they provide an invitation to be intimate, right? Like maybe that's kind of in a caress or a very direct ask. And oftentimes that higher level of pain causes a shutdown response. Just no, no, I don't want to. Or maybe it's okay, sure, a reluctant, but you're not feeling like I want to do that. So, how do we move that to not that, but yes to this? And part of the way we do that is really to open up our vision of our menu to affectionate, sensual, erotic touch. So, if we take it into, a specific example, um, and we have maybe an adult, and let's just say both individuals are caring for their bodies with HS, and one person is maybe at a low pain level, say a 2 or 3, and the other person again is at a higher pain level, 7 or 8. Let's also throw in that the person at 7 or 8 is at a higher level of fatigue. Um, and they've been apart for a while and they're really looking to connect, and so person one with a lower pain level says, like, hey, we have the whole evening. um, we don't have to take care of the animals, we don't have to take care of the kids tonight, I'd love to be with you. And that other person at the higher pain level is just thinking, oh gosh, like, I love you and I'm not in the mood. How do they then think about, does that mean I don't want to be touched at all? Right? Like, get away from me? Or could that mean, um, I can't imagine being naked. I can't imagine wanting to have a penetrative sexual experience, but I would love something that included warmth. Um, I would love, an area of my body that maybe I just got a lot of, um, was just out in some nice summer sun, and maybe I just got a pedicure. I was lucky enough to get a pedicure, so I'm feeling good about, say, my feet and my lower legs, my calves. That feels kind of like good and sexy. And so maybe the ask is more in the sensual area. I don't think I can have sex in the way of a penetrative experience, but I think I'd love to get out this nice oil. I think I'd love to just listen to a really jazzy, lovely song with you. And I would love it if you could rub some of this lotion on me and we could just kind of like be together, listen to the music. That feels so much different for both people than a no, no, I don't want to. No, I'm just going to sit on my phone and scroll, right? It's connective. It might awaken something new, and it's keeping the door open to sexual pleasure and intimacy. It allows a place of negotiation. So I think the piece that's really important to that is opening your mind to, I have a right to have affectionate, sensual, and erotic touch in my life. And generally, it is a good thing for our lives and our body to have that. I think that another question people often ask and talk about in the HS community is, what about dating? What about meeting new people? And when do I let them know about my HS? And I have a lot of thoughts about that. But one of the things I do think a lot about is in new relationships, we can think of this almost as like a walk into the erotic. So uh, it's different for everybody, but generally it's intimidating to do something that would be considered more of erotic touch. And so maybe you want to start those first couple dates with things that feel more in your realm of the affectionate. And again, you need to kind of make your list of what that looks like for you, walking then into the realm of the sensual in those first few dates and kind of leading into the more erotic piece. And certainly if people want to talk more about negotiating that and talking about your HS and as part of our Q&A, we can definitely do that. Taking a sip of coffee here. Um, some of this information is from an article, and this is I think a sociology research that was done again out of the University of Michigan, and it was published in the New York Times, called 238 Reasons and Counting. And I love this idea because I think we're taught when we're younger in many homes that um, maybe you have sex to procreate. Again, that would be a penetrative experience. You have sex to because you love somebody. And let's see if that's your main reason. Okay, we'll go with that because you love somebody, you want to connect with them. What we find are in relationships that there's also a lot of other reasons that lead people to that. In the pandemic, it was boredom. People were just bored. And so they were thinking, I don't know, I could watch more TV or I could do something sexy. Sometimes it's a negotiation, right? Like I really want somebody to be able to come through for me and help me with the kids or help me with the pets, help me with the housework. So I know they're going to be more apt to do that if we have some sexy time. They'll be in a better mood. So I'm willing to do that. That's what I want to do. Or maybe like I am kind of irritated with this partner I have, but it makes me feel sexy when I do this. So that's a reason I want to do it. I think the number 238 was because there was a limitation in the number of times we survey people, not because we stopped counting there. I think this number goes into the thousands and thousands. And there's not a right or wrong, right? That this we limit how we think about sexual pleasure as like it's for love or it's for connection. And if we allow ourselves to say there might be a lot of reasons, and if you're living with HS, part of that is freeing yourself sometimes. Again, if we get away from sex as penetration and we think about sex as defined by you, something that brings you sexual pleasure, well, then there's a lot of things that might be good for you to do and might be a release, freedom in your body, exploration. Maybe it's a selfish thing. Maybe we're just thinking about sexual pleasure on your own. Maybe that's something that instead of kind of scrolling on your phone or watching a movie, it feels really good to again kind of be in a cool or warm environment and have an orgasm, right? Play with a sex toy. Like maybe it's a very kind of selfish time for you, but opening yourself up to countless reasons that you want to be or allow yourself to be intimate. Um, so, one of the things we need to think about also is how are we going to get into a space where we understand what we like and what we need? And the majority of people I've talked to in my career, both as, you know, as a professor and as a therapist and as an educator, most people have not had the opportunity and feel pretty intimidated about thinking about how do I explore who I am as a sexual person. So a beginning step is just to allow yourself to think of yourself that way. you are a sexual person. It is a priority and a right in your life. You need time and energy to dedicate to that. Think about on a daily basis how much energy and how much time you give to other people. Some of those other people you may not even like. Um, if you already got up and came to CCS, you probably had to park or navigate transportation. Probably had to figure out how to find yourself something to eat or drink. You might have had to make your bed. You might have had to talk to a family at home before you left. You probably texted some people or messaged some people in some fashion. You've already given so much to other people. But by the time you have time for yourself today, will you have energy left? So we actually really have to prioritize this if we're going to learn about ourselves. We have to find a place in our lives that we can practice this. And I think a lot of people, I still use the old-fashioned planner, but most people don't. But thinking about how am I going to create a space for that? And what does that space need to look like? How am I going to have the privacy to do that? How am I going to have the time left and the energy? What what do I need around me? Is that something I read? Is it something I listen to? Is it something I watch? Is it somebody I talk to? How am I going to find that space to explore? And then what is it? How does it connect with the rest of me? So, and I think that's one of the hardest pieces for people is sometimes the person that they find, their sexual self, feels really kind of hidden and different and far away from the rest of their identity. And sometimes it could even be associated with shame for people because they don't understand it. Why do I like this? Do I, will other people be okay with that? But I think just walking into a space that you're able to and allowed to explore that is so, so imperative, making room for that. So there's a fair amount of research that tells us that people who are able to explore their sexuality on their own have a much higher level of sexual pleasure, 12 times. This is research from Indiana University at the Kinsey uh, Institute, and it was used to inform something that they call OMG Yes, which is open to the public. And OMG Yes talks about particularly people with vaginas and vulvas and how they experience pleasure. So it helps learn about pleasure exploration. Um, and some of the research they found is among those people that do, they're 5 times happier in general in relationships, and they're 12 times more likely to be sexually satisfied. I will just kind of put out an informative piece of information. I find OMGS to be really, really helpful for a lot of clients I'm working with that maybe have never explored themselves, have never masturbated, um, and they want to learn about it. It does have bodies who um, are nude, and it does it's a very different experience. We were watching it in a class last semester, and kind of, I shared some of the warnings. If you don't want to, if for religious spiritual reasons, maybe you don't want to see um, nudity, feel free not to participate. But what I found really interesting among my students is they had seen lots of naked bodies. They said like they had watched lots of porn coming up in a generation of high-speed internet, and that was a way that they learned about sex. And they said, I've never though had the experience of watching real people talk about and explore their bodies in this way. And it was very freeing for them and also pretty overwhelming. Like they were like, wow, this feels intimate in and of itself. So I thought that was, I think it's a worthwhile invitation. It's not for everybody, but it might be really helpful. I'm assuming that spoon theory is probably something that those of you in the room have heard about and are maybe using in your lives, but hopefully it's not super, dedicating a few minutes to it in case there's somebody that has not, I think is really important. So spoon theory was created by an individual with that was dealing with medical disability. And one of the things they noticed is when people couldn't see their disability, they didn't really account for their particular needs. And so they explained the level of energy they had in their day from spoons on a table at like a, since we're sitting in Detroit, a Coney Island, let's say. And they said to the person they were with, like, if you if you have 12 spoons in a day, because I'm dealing with illness, I've already used like a spoon just to get out of bed because that was really hard, and another spoon to take care of my body because I have to do wound care. And I've already used another spoon um, because I'm going to have to also plan to have an extra change of clothes just in case because I'm having a lot of leaking. And so I'm already 3 spoons down. And that means I got 9 left and I'm saving some. I'm saving some so that when I get home, I can spend some time with my partner. And saving some also means I'm not going to do all my emails today. And I don't want to dedicate a spoon to that. And I don't want to dedicate a spoon to this friend I love that tends to just kind of dump. We probably all have that friend, right? Just like, here's everything wrong with me. I don't want to use my spoon for that today. So I think that when I'm thinking about this community that we are dedicated to this weekend, um, you need to recognize that you have a right to figure out how you want to use your spoons. And I would say that when you're thinking about partners you're going to be with, you need to be very, very intentional about talking about your spoons. And I'm hoping that you will leave some spoons for your sexual pleasure, at least on some days. Because if you don't, nobody is going to do that for you, right? Like, and it's good for your health. It's good for your mental health. It's good for your emotional health. And you deserve that. But it is actually work you have to do to make space for that. I know we're getting close to Q&A, so one other tip I wanted to provide was some of you may have heard of the sort of want, will, won't. Want, will, won't is a way of initial personal, your own communication with yourself about what you want to do sexually, what you will do. So that's kind of your yellow light. You're like, meh, I've never tried that. I don't know much about anal play, but I would be open to it. I I don't know if I'm excited about it yet, but it's on my maybe list, right? And then I won't. And your all of this can change, right? Your want, will, won't is today. It's just today. But if you gave yourself a chance to create that list, what do you want to do sexually? What will you do? And what's a full on I won't? Um, that is a wonderful place to start and just see what you can list. I think this idea of sexual negotiation or collaboration, which was taught to me by a real expert in the field of kink and BDSM, Midori. And Midori talks about how do you feel in the moment? What do you want to feel? What are you hoping to feel? Um, what expectations do you have around that? So, for instance, if I can have a minute here, just to kind of go through this, I might say to a partner, you know, I'm kind of feeling like a little on the, I've been irritable all day. I saved a couple spoons for some sexual play I want to have with you. But I'm feeling a little tired and I'm honestly feeling a little selfish today. So I feel like what I want is stuff for me. I want to be given stuff. Um, so I'm wondering if how you're feeling about maybe some being naked, some oils, some massage. Um, I was kind of reading about I was reviewing some things on my will list and I was wondering if I could kind of get brave and maybe try out something about some handcuffs while we do that and just or a blindfold, see what that is, right? What would you like to get out of that? So you kind of turn to another partners and say, what would you like? What are your expectations? How will I know you're liking this? And how will you know I'm liking this? That's a really helpful thing to tell a partner so that they can kind of course correct instead of saying what's your safe word, what's your no word. What if we gave people ways to know when we're really enjoying it, when we're bored, when we're in pain, when something doesn't feel good, so they know how to kind of change directions. And then leaving space to say very openly, here's what's going on with my body today. I mentioned I'm kind of tired. I'm also having um, some a lot of pain in the area of my buttocks and my genitals. And so that's kind of an area I don't want to play as much in, but I'm really excited about being seen and even being touched around my chest and my nipples. And here's my hard limits. Here's what I can't do for today. And here's some ways I'd love us to take care of aftercare, each other afterwards. When we know we both give each other messages that we're finished, how will I know? So I'd like to invite you to think about if you were allowed to have a want, will, won't list that changed, that was modified every single day. And also if your collaboration with sexual partners really walked through these steps, how different that could be um, in talking about sexual pleasure and in getting what you want. And one final question I'll leave us with comes from author Emily Nagoski. And she asks us this question, what am I saying yes to when I say yes to sex? And what am I saying no to when I say no to sex? I ask people to think about this when they're in the sex therapy space. And generally, people are surprised by what they sometimes shut down in their lives that they're not aware of, and what fears and shame come up. And also, when they're saying yes, what are they inviting into their life? So these are two tools, this last slide and this slide here, that I think are very, very imperative for um, intervention, for what you're going to get out of your world. I think once you have these tools, you can really begin to, there's a wealth of articles, books, YouTube, podcasts, so many ideas about positions, kink, exploration. Those are your menus, right? You get to fill those up. But first, you really need to think about this idea of intimate justice, what you invite into your life, how you cultivate a space for learning about it. And hopefully the tools I've provided this morning offer a little bit of help for that. I don't think I don't know that we have any educators in the room. I do have a book that was out about a year and a half ago, Sex, Social Justice, and Intimacy in Health Practice. Um, and this certainly is something that has more exercises and ways to explore. It's aimed for mental health and medical professionals, but certainly has a lot of the same activities I've talked about today if you are interested at all. And I've also shared my email there. If there's questions that you don't want to bring up to a group but would like to reach out, feel free to shoot me an email. Just let you know you were at the conference, and I'm also happy to answer questions there. I'm gonna stop the slides and just see if anyone has comments or questions. Yeah, it looks like we do have a question. Do we need a mic or? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, the mic's on its way up there.
Um, can we circle back and talk a little bit more about when it's appropriate to disclose your HS in a new relationship, or
Yeah,
just when you're dating or what have you?
yeah, for sure. Um, I do think that I hear a lot of people say it would feel better to me if I get it out in the open. Um, and I really, we just talked about the sex educator Midori. In one of her YouTube presentations, she has a moment where she just says, as she's talking about how to do sexual collaboration, and she says, and I also want to let you know I have genital herpes. So as we're being sexual, these are some things that will make that comfortable and safe for us. And I really love sort of watching and rewatching that clip because for her, there's so much freedom in just like, if I put this out here right away, I don't have to keep on worrying about it. I don't have to keep on holding that. I'm going to just let you know. And she doesn't say it in a guilty way. She's just like, I have genital herpes. Here's what we're going to do about that. She says it, and she kind of owns the room when she says it. And I think for some people, that's going to feel best. And if you're one of those more direct people that are like, that'll just clear the air, I think you go with that. You probably tell people before you're even walking into a space that you might be sexual. I think for other people, it's more thinking about that affectionate, sensual, erotic space. When we talked about those slides, it's getting to know somebody and thinking about, like, I think we're walking towards that direction. And I think I want to tell them a bit more about my body, right? And that might be a few dates in. And that's another option that I think is completely appropriate. What I would say, a tip that I think is really helpful is to give somebody a sort of like a trust test. So lay out something else in your life that feels vulnerable and see how they handle it. Don't give them HS right away because you're testing them, not yourself. You're letting them know, I want to see what you do with this. Like, so I might say, let's say that I don't know what an example might be. Maybe I have a family member that's dealing with a certain crisis that I think people have some feelings about in certain ways. And I might say, hey, I want to share this with you. And I'm seeing, like, are they thoughtful? Are they kind? Do they ask questions? I think the other thing we want to tell people is, I have something to share with you. It's hard for me to talk about. It's really emotional. It has to do with both my emotional and my physical health. What I would like you to do when I share this with you is X, right? For me personally, I don't want you to be silent. That's the worst thing in the world is when I tell something hard and somebody just sits and stares at me. I don't want you to do that. I'd love you to ask questions. I don't need you to feel sorry for me. Those are some of the things on my list. But most people in the world that aren't living with HS don't seem to know about HS. Conferences like this today are changing things, but they don't know. And so they're going to be overwhelmed, probably. They're going to probably have a lot of questions. And maybe we don't want them, maybe we don't want to do all the work to educate them. Maybe we do. You let them know before you tell them anything. Here's what would be helpful in the conversation. And I think that's a way more successful way. Um, these are all the tips I've kind of learned, and I've cheated by grabbing this information from the last 10 years from the HS community too. But I think a lot of it is based on your personality. I would encourage you also to practice the talk with a bestie or in front of the mirror. I know that sounds so nerdy, but like my best my best nervous talks are in front of the mirror and just really figuring out that tone where you can kind of own the world, you know? Okay. Any other questions or comments or things people maybe even want to add to that?
I just wanted to say I think you were really spot on with how, the situation should be approached, because I'm looking at it from an opposite perspective because my partner has HS. So when she informed me of it, it was I just felt bad for her initially, because here was this perfect specimen in front of me, sweetest person I've ever met, dealing with so much. And it was overwhelming. And it always felt weird to ask questions a lot to her, because I didn't want it to become overwhelming for her to, have to respond and answer those questions. So me as, her partner, I had to take it upon myself to do a little bit of research on my own, to put forth that effort to let her know that I was there and being supportive of the situation. So I just wanted to come in and say I think you're spot on about it, and it's really all about how your partner reciprocates and responds to it. So to your point about not sitting there and being silent, I think it's just better to ask questions, but tread lightly as you ask questions and build that trust and the communication about it. So awesome.
Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you for doing the research. Like, what an amazing partner. We're not, I think some of us are going to have to be a little bit more direct with our expectations because not every partner is going to be, as aware as you. Like that's a beautiful gift. And you were like, yeah, I'm going to do my research, but not everyone will. And sometimes we're going to have to tell them, like, hey, here's the baseline information, but I'm not gonna do all your work for you. So thank you so much for sharing from your own experience. Anybody else?
I definitely want to piggyback that. Thank you so much. I've dealt with a partner who also has done the research, and it's very reassuring and affirming to know that we're not blamed or looked at negatively or like, ew, what is that? So thank you also for being in this room. Um, I just wanted to ask, I don't know if you covered this topic or not because I came a little late. um, but how do you deal with the embarrassment if you're in the middle of being intimate with your partner and you have a flare up that happens to drain or burst in the middle of doing everything? How do you approach that to where they're not like, ew, what's going on?
Yeah, we didn't cover that. I think that, and I hope I'm not taking up the room too long. I love that we have questions, but feel free to kick me out if you need to. But
I believe we have enough time.
okay. So I think that a lot of that is doing some of that early work. So when we think about the will, your sort of sometimes maybe or your will won't list. I think that that would go on that list, right? I will do XYZ today, but I want to let you know that I'm having a lot of trouble in this area of my body. I'm having a lot of pain. And here's the possibility that can happen. Going back to I was once doing in a wonderful HS support group I was invited to, and one of the things that really hit me with something someone said is she was saying, my partner loves to go down on me, and I need to recognize that I'm scared about that. My partner's not scared about that, right? So if we give our partners information, that's our work. right? We don't need to apologize about it. They get to decide, do I want to enter into that? And you, of course, are going to have your own experience, right? Your own fear, maybe your own like trauma trigger, because maybe another partner didn't treat you well when that happened in the past. And that's going to be scary and it's going to be emotional. But remember to let that other person you're with do their own set of work, right? So when that happens, you can say, oh my gosh, like this just happened. And let them recognize that they made a choice. They knew that this could happen. They can help clean up, right? And they might not be as upset about it as you are, because for you, it's really upsetting because you've been holding the responsibility for the whole room, for your own experience, for their experience, and that's too much work to do. So I think it's about a mindset thing, and I think it's about the communication before about what is possible. We do a lousy job as educators, as parents, as teachers of helping people think about the communication before we go into a big experience. We do a better job on a roller coaster of telling people what might happen, how to put the seatbelt on, all of that stuff, but we don't do that in sexual experiences. And if you do that and you let people know, here's what I'm willing to do, here's what you need to be prepared for, and how are we going to deal with that together? And again, I would encourage you to say, here's what I need from you if this does happen. Don't get silent on me. Don't run out of the room. One other thing that someone once taught me is say sorry once. The first sorry is for the other person, and any sorry after that is just a guilty sorry. So if you feel like you're like, oh, I'm sorry that happened, oh, I'm bummed that happened, and then just kind of let it be. It's hard, but those are some of the things that I think have been helpful for people in the past.
Thank you so much. Because I know seeing people on social media now displaying their intimacies and how they make their money, it sets a certain tone for what people expect a body to look like, because you don't see people in the sex work industry at all with HS. And if you do, we're too ashamed to show because society is mean. And when you have something that looks abnormal, they like to pick and poke and make fun of. So it's hard to be intimate with other people when you have multiple flares, you have multiple scars. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that point. I hope that our world, I don't think it's anyone's responsibility with HS to change that, but I think that those are the boundaries that have to consistently, be broken through art. I love, the wall of vagina was such a changing piece. Just to, you can look it up. You can buy mugs and T-shirts of the wall of vagina, right? But like, it's casts of all these different vulvas, and it's just one little tiny example of how cruel and awful and horrible the expectations are of what a body is supposed to look like, and nobody's body looks like they're all different, right? But we're set up to have all this shame and then this meaning associated with it, just like with HS. Like, do you have this because fill in the blank, all these ideas that have been shared about what causes it, which inherently is about what people are supposedly doing wrong or not doing it. And it's just bunk, right? Like, but we need brave people doing the artwork, having the conversations, getting the information out there, and maybe even showing bodies doing beautiful, sexy things that are bodies with HS.